Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!
Welcome to the Mad Max Minute Podcast, the daily podcast where we break down Mad Max 1 minute at a time. I'm Rick.
And I'm Julia.
And today we're talking about minute 39, which begins with Toecutter picking Johnny up off the sand, and it ends with the singer at the Sugartown Cabaret.
Yeah, so we catch the second half of the line. Just checking my notes. Bubba's saying to Johnny, you just don't have the style. And then he calls him chicken shit.
Yeah, he says, you just don't have the style, do you, chicken shit?
You know, it suddenly occurs to me that maybe I'm sure there are online tutorials about how to do Australian accents. Might be something we want to look into.
It might be. The only instruction that I've ever received on how to do an Australian accent was from that one time Harmontown went to Australia and he had that one phrase he was practicing. Like that hot, mate.
Yeah.
And like that's the only thing I really have to go on.
Yep.
Hopefully as we watch more Australian movies, we'll like be able to pick up on the nuances and subtlety and, you know, melodic quality of the Australian accent. But, you know, that'll come in time.
Yeah, it's a work in progress.
It's a work in progress.
Anyways, I found it really interesting that Bubba called Johnny chicken shit because Bubba has presented this persona of being above everybody else, being much more on Toecutter's level or near Toecutter's level. And he doesn't participate in the frivolities. He actually like disdains the frivolities. It is the game of children. Mm-hmm. And, you know, he sits there stoically glaring at them while they're off having fun. You know, over and over we see examples of how he isn't into the goofing off and the being rowdy. He's much more into the managing of the gang. And he sets himself up as being also more mature. And then he even juxtaposes. He says to Johnny, you don't have the style for this. And then he immediately calls him chicken shit. He's stooping to their level.
Yeah, he definitely sets himself up as being above things like cursing, and then he immediately curses at him.
I feel like he lowered himself.
Yeah.
I didn't like it.
I feel like
I didn't like the juxtaposition between style and swearing.
Yeah. I see it more like he's talking down. Like, his use of profanity accentuates the condescension that he is giving Johnny. Like, Johnny is of the caliber of individual that the only thing he would understand would be crude language. And so, as a way of illustrating, you don't have the style, and you are something low, and this is a word that you would use to describe others, so this is a word I'm going to use to describe you. And really, when it comes to things that are low and things that are loathsome, you know, chicken poop is pretty high up on that list, just because it can be so pervasive in like farmyards and whatnot, because there's chickens everywhere and they poop everywhere.
Good point. I think that seems much more like Bubba. He is illustrating how he is above them by using their language to insult them. Mm-hmm. So as this is happening, Toecutter has thrown off his potato blanket and walks up behind Bubba. And I found his appearance to be very interesting. His shirt, first of all, is very blousy. So I think we were having another conversation, and I can't quite remember when, about you made a comment about a few ruffles short of a pirate shirt.
Yes. Okay. That conversation was when we were recording with Spinal Tap Minute.
That's right.
Because
he's like wearing the same shirt.
David St. Hubbins is up there on stage, and he's wearing this like blousy looking white shirt thing. Yeah. And I said it's a couple ruffles short of a pirate shirt. Interesting that you should bring that up. Because Spinal Tap Minute, which I think started this past Monday, which means the minute we recorded with them should be playing today.
Yes.
So after you're done listening to us, go look up Spinal Tap Minute and listen to, obviously, the first 3 minutes. But then we're in episode 4.
Yes.
So if you like listening to us, go give them a listen.
It was so much fun recording with them.
Yeah, when you talk about cult movies, Spinal Tap Minute is definitely one of those, and we had a lot of fun recording with them.
Yeah, we had such a great time recording with Heidi and Sean. They were lots of fun.
Yeah.
And wow, do they know their stuff.
Yeah.
They are really good. Yeah. I was very impressed with their level of knowledge.
Yeah. I should put out a disclaimer, though. If you don't like it when I go over IMDb listings, you might be slightly annoyed with my contribution to that episode, depending on how it ended up coming out edited.
Oh, I don't know. It's a lot easier to go over and be interesting going over IMDb stuff when you're dealing with people who went on to be famous.
Yeah.
Which we don't deal with a lot in Mad Max.
It's so rough to full on admit that a lot of the people we talk about, oh yeah, when we talk about them,
at least
they did.
not in America. I mean, I'm sure in Australia it's completely different.
Yeah.
Their level of fame. But with Spinal Tap, these are actors we see all over the place. And we found some very amusing surprises.
Oh, absolutely.
So it's, definitely worth a listen.
For sure.
Yeah. Okay, so back to Toecutter. So he's wearing this blousy white shirt that is it looks like it's coffee stained.
Yeah.
It's a disaster. And one shoulder is quite ripped, half ripped off already. Which, when you think about it, I mean, they're part of a biker gang in a, excuse me, in a semi-post-apocalyptic setting. They're hanging out on a beach.
Yeah.
Their form of entertainment is a mannequin. So...
How...
So they're grooming,
How much laundry do you think they ever do?
Yeah, it's not top notch.
Probably next to none.
Yes. But you get a glimpse of some sort of shoulder pad underneath. Did you notice that?
I did notice something.
And
it kind of looked like a leather panel or something like that.
Okay, so do you think it was like a protective
Probably.
bike riding thing?
Probably.
Because I know, motorcycle jackets, not yours, because you're a little lax on safety sometimes, but... But some motorcycle jackets have shields in them, built on the shoulders and elbows and back. So maybe it's one of those.
Right.
That's built into his everyday clothing.
It's not a bad idea.
No.
Certainly not.
No.
So
he walks up behind Bubba, and his presentation is very ominous. He's a large man. He's tall, he's broad, he's got this head of hair. It's like a lion's mane. It's glorious. And the music that they put with him walking up is fantastic. It really gives us a great effect of him being ominous. It's at this point that Bubba, who is kind of shrinking into the background. Yeah,
he's stepping back to let Toecutter come forward.
Yes. He says something.
Yeah, he leans over and he kind of says, "Goes to water on a dummy." And I heard that. And a lot of the people who watched this movie, I was confused by what it meant and what it was in reference to. And there was a bit of conversation I saw on some message boards where someone was like, well, does he say dummy or does he say dunny? Because dunny is slang for something else, but it's specifically goes to water on a dummy. And it kind of makes me wonder if the phrase goes to water is in reference to something like peeing yourself or losing your nerve or
losing your composure.
Exactly.
Losing control, because his reaction to the dummy and shooting the dummy was very...
not erratic. That's not the word I was thinking of. It's very...
emotional. It was a very emotional reaction.
Yes.
I feel like it was sparked by the comment that the Bronze take our pride, and Johnny, whose pride was just very, very, very much taken by the Bronze, had this emotional reaction. He made a scene.
Yes, he did.
By taking the gun, futzing through the sand, and shooting the mannequin. So he lost control. He was acting emotionally. And in a biker gang, you can't act emotionally. You have to be in control. You have to be disciplined. Toecutter's the one that gets to act emotionally. He's the leader.
Yeah, they all have to fall in line with what he wants.
Yes. And Johnny, being what we believe is a novice, does not have that right.
Yeah. So I like the evaluation that the phrase goes to water, is more like how I always say goes off the rails.
Yes.
I feel like going to water probably mentions that. And considering that they're in Australia, I'm willing to bet, and I am making a huge leap here, and I'm really hoping our Australian listeners know more about this specific phrase than I'm putting on right now, but I have a feeling that if you are in a situation where you're in an arid, let's say the outback type of setting, if the heat gets to you and you start going crazy and you start running at mirages thinking that they are sources of water, and this could probably go for any sort of desert setting, your compatriots could probably see, oh, this guy is going to water. He is rushing off in a crazed, mindless manner because the sun has just baked his head. I feel like that is an adequate evaluation of the line.
That's interesting.
If I am wrong, I am counting on our listeners to correct me, as I always do. But I feel like it's appropriate. I feel like that way.
It's a very interesting way to look at it. I like it.
Mm-hmm. So after Bubba says that line, Toecutter steps forward and he just takes hold of Johnny. And speaking of taking hold, I find it kind of interesting that Toecutter let Johnny take the shotgun from him initially. When Johnny jumped up in the last minute and grabbed the shotgun away from Toecutter, he didn't offer up any resistance. He just kind of let it go. And
he didn't move until it was all over.
It makes me wonder if the Toecutter doesn't so much keep his gang in line as much as he allows them to act and then he corrects them afterwards.
It just reminded me, there's a kind of a cliche saying that troublemaker type people often say, is that you ask for forgiveness rather than permission. Mm-hmm. And this is like the opposite view of that. Rather than telling them what to do, he corrects them when they do something wrong.
Right.
He lets them figure it out for themselves. And then, but if they do it wrong, as we see in this scene, it's not pretty.
Yeah, and I feel like this is a management style that Johnny's not wholly used to, because as Toecutter grabs him, by the hair and the necktie, Johnny is legitimately getting dragged around. It's not like he's recognizing, okay, time for correction, and kind of tries to keep up with the Toecutter. He's getting dragged around quite a bit.
Yes. He also takes the shotgun back.
Yeah. Grabs the hair, picks him up, grabs the tie, and just takes the shotgun back. But he doesn't pass it off. He continues carrying it with him because it's going to factor into the next shot that we see with them.
And it is his gun.
Yeah. Now, it's funny because we learn later on in the movie, and I think this might just be a joke that he says, but Toecutter doesn't necessarily like guns. We'll see that when we get to the farmhouse. Yeah. It's much further down the line.
It's interesting that so Toecutter professes later on that he doesn't like guns. The 2 times that we've seen him use the gun, he shoots it into the air to get everybody's attention.
Yep.
And then he shoves it in Johnny's mouth in a couple of seconds to illustrate a point. Yeah. So both times he's using the gun not as a gun. He's using it for something else. Yeah.
Either some sort of way to call, either as a call to action or a...
Call to inaction.
Yeah. Kind of maybe a metaphor. I don't know.
Yeah. He seems to like his metaphors, so...
But before we get to the second use of the shotgun...
Yeah.
We get a shot shift. We start off looking at them, with the water behind the camera, and then we get a quick shift where the camera is looking towards the water. Yes. And it's not so much we get a shift in shot, we also get a major shift in time. Yes. As you're looking at them initially, it's bright and sunny, lots of blue sky, and then in the next shot, suddenly it's, the sun is going down. And it's not so much that the sun is going down, but all of the shadows of the people that are standing on the beach are facing the exact opposite direction. Mm-hmm. Well, maybe not exact opposite. Maybe it's like a 90-degree shift, but details, not important.
Which says the person who is analyzing a movie minute by minute.
I gotta say, I need to amend that phrase and find a new one to throw into situations where I get tied up in the minutia of how many degrees the shadows have shifted in a scene. Yes. Because in this instance, it's meant to be immediately one shot following the other.
Yes. Now, in defense of production here, when you're shooting outside, it's really hard to avoid stuff like this. Mm-hmm. Because they're not shooting necessarily in real time. They do more than one take. They have to reset things. Things take time.
They have to go to lunch.
Yes. So, it's kind of unavoidable. And they just deal with it the best they can. And actually, if I remember correctly from the behind the scenes, the light had changed so much that they weren't planning on shooting the scene with them walking into the water. But they had to because that's where the light was. That's the perspective and the camera angle that they could get the light that they needed. So they ended up wading into the water.
Yeah, and
I think that was...
It really
I
does pay
love
off.
that they were standing in the water. I think it's a beautiful scene. It's very effective. I really love it.
Yeah. So, like I said, we shift to this wide shot of the beach facing the water. And as we see Toecutter leading Johnny away from the group, everyone just kind of relaxes and starts doing their own thing again. And the one person I particularly paid attention to is Clunk. And it seems like Clunk is starting to make towards the mannequin because, you know, he went...
It's his mannequin.
It's his mannequin.
And they
he went
took
and
it
found
from
it.
him.
And they shot it up. And
Yeah, he's got to go rescue his mannequin.
he's going to go rescue Polystyrene
Yeah.
from the bad people who shot her.
Yeah. I like that the general gang populace recognizes that their part in the scene is over.
Right.
It's now a one-on-one scene. They feel comfortable going back to what they were doing and goofing off and relaxing.
Right.
Yeah. I like that. It shows a level of control over the group that Toecutter has, that they know, and we've mentioned this before with his nonverbal cues. He's masterful at nonverbal cues. They have read his nonverbal cue of him walking away with Johnny, that they're no longer involved.
Right. This is now a one-on-one powwow that he needs to have with Johnny so that Johnny can understand something.
Yep.
So-
Really illustrates the power of Toecutter. Again.
So we cut closer to them, and this is where, like you said, where they're standing in the water, because
Yes.
that's where the light is.
And it's not immediately obvious, because them standing in the water wasn't part of the point of the scene. So we don't get a shot of their legs showing that they're standing in the water.
Yeah, until I think it's like
Until they
pulls
walk
out a little
away.
bit or something like that.
Yeah. Then we see that they're actually standing in water.
Yep. So Toecutter has Johnny once again, and the text of the scene has Toecutter saying, "It's all right. It's okay. Just remember to keep your sweet, sweet mouth shut."
Yes.
And as he's saying that, like, he's taken the shotgun, like you said before, and put it up into Johnny's mouth. And it's interesting, as he has the shotgun in Johnny's mouth, that he's not actually holding down by the trigger. He's actually holding up past the breech.
Yeah, he has no intention.
Like,
The intimidation that he's trying to show Johnny isn't that he's going to shoot his brains out.
right.
It's more of the metaphor that he loves so much of the shotgun in the mouth. It's definitely more the metaphor.
Yeah, I think the idea of Toecutter putting the barrel of a gun into Johnny's mouth might have
Well, there's that.
an overtone to it that I don't necessarily want to come right out and say.
Ah.
Because
Well,
a lot of times in media, you know, firearms are interpreted as phallic symbols.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, we know that the gang has interesting ideas about sex and violence. We know that Toecutter has interesting sways over his subordinates. And I've seen a couple of people posting online the idea that the sexuality of the gang itself, like as a whole, is very, what's the word I'm looking for?
Do you mean like part of their identity?
Like, part of their identity is that you're never really quite sure if, like, trying to recall exactly how I read it. The idea that the gang sends off dangerous vibes in a homosexual and heterosexual sense to just really throw people off their guard. Because there are people that are frightened by gang members, there are people that are frightened by homosexuals, there are people that are frightened by street toughs. Like, and I feel like when you have a phallic symbol being shoved into another character's mouth by a character who is of a more powerful position than them, like, that's a power move in and of itself, but it also has that undertone of control, that Johnny is now in a situation where he has lost his autonomy.
Mm-hmm. Interesting that you use the word control, because that's what rape is about.
Yeah.
Rape is about control. It's not about sex. It's not about feeling good. It's not about sexual pleasure. It's about control.
Yeah. So I find it interesting, just the idea that Toecutter would shove that barrel into Johnny's mouth. And a bit of IMDb behind the scenes trivia. When Hugh Keys-Byrne did that to Tim Burns, he actually cut the inside of Tim Burns' mouth. And so I think you noted that when he pulls the barrel out, Tim Burns' mouth kind of stays the same shape.
Yeah, his face doesn't relax at all. He's still like wide-eyed and startled and not knowing what's going on. His mouth is still open wide, like he's in shock.
Yeah, and it's an incredibly shocking scene because it is so brutal. And it's interesting because you can tell that Toecutter has a level of affection for his gang members, but it's a very abusive relationship.
Yes, and I think his level of affection and respect for Johnny is less than others. I think it's just barely enough to keep him around.
Yeah.
I think if he had any less affection for Johnny and maybe confidence in his prospects, he wouldn't have rescued him from the cops.
Yeah, I think
he wouldn't have sent Bubba back.
it goes back to that idea that Toecutter sees potential for Johnny to be an asset to the gang.
Yes. But he recognizes that Johnny needs to learn.
Yeah.
And this is exactly...
And this is how he teaches.
Yes.
Through, being incredibly brutal one moment. And then after he pulls the shotgun out of his mouth and ends his line, he takes Johnny's head and kind of cradles it up against his chest as they walk further out into the water.
Yes.
Tonally, this scene is... I can't even describe it because there's that anxiety that exists. There's the violence. There's the sexual undertone. It's just very affecting.
Yes.
As a watcher.
And it does feel like, an abusive relationship, and how abusive relationships between a man and a woman have been represented to us in media. Of, the abusive man degrading and beating the woman, and then once that is over, being overly affectionate. Mm-hmm. Like he's making up for it.
And I feel like that's exactly what we see here.
That's exactly what we're seeing.
Absolutely.
And it is absolutely a position of power.
Oh, yeah.
And we see that in both examples of, an abusive relationship between a man and a woman. People will say to the woman, well, why don't you just leave? And they don't understand that this man is in control of her. That's part of the abuse. It's the point of the abuse. He wants to be in control of her, and it's working right now.
Yeah. And
so she can't leave. And it's definitely, we've commented many times about Toecutter and his power plays. Mm-hmm. And I think we can still safely say up to this point that everything he does accentuates his power and increases it and reiterates it to his subordinates. We have not seen him do anything even remotely weak this whole movie yet. Yeah.
I feel like this scene is going to be a little bit mirrored. We're not going to talk about The Minute I've Got in My Mind until about April. I think it's the first week in April is when we really get into it, past the halfway point of the movie. But there's a minute later on where there's another interaction between the two of them where Toecutter is just brutal to Johnny. And it's, it makes you take a step back and really just, ooh, type of thing. Mm-hmm. So as they're walking out into the sunset, we get to take a step away from this situation because we cut to a neon sign advertising the Sugartown Cabaret. We get about 12 seconds at the end of this minute where we're seeing the Sugartown Cabaret sign, and then I think it's the last 7 seconds of this minute where we're actually just panning across the interior of the Sugartown Cabaret. And considering that we're going to spend so much time with the cabaret tomorrow, I think we'll save that for then.
Yes. Yeah, I think so. We'll really get into it tomorrow.
Yeah, because the atmosphere we're leaving at the beach versus the atmosphere we're going to find ourselves in at the cabaret.
Very drastic.
Very different.
Yes.
So you can look forward to us having a bit more of a lighthearted and raucous time at the Sugartown Cabaret starting tomorrow. And we will see you then. In the meantime, our website is madmaxminute.com. You can follow us on Twitter at madmaxminute and like us on Facebook at facebook.com/madmaxminute.
Thank you for joining us for Mad Max Minute number 39. We'll see you at the cabaret.
Motorbikes and leather men take me to the edge of the dream.